With a couple of simple tricks, we're going to make this bass part sound a lot more fun. So let's head over to that bass part and look at what we've got. We've got everything happening on the downbeat. So I'm just going to solo the drums and the bass. I want to put that on the upbeat. So to do that, I'm going to go into the MIDI editor and look at the beginning. I've just played this in on beat 1, on beat 2. Here's measure 1, beat 3, measure 1, beat 4. I want to move all this stuff to this block right here. Instead of beat 1, I want it to be on the second part of 1. So I'm going to highlight all this stuff and just drag it over there. Now if your grid is not set up for eighth notes, definitely do that. Go to your grid and make sure that you're on eighth notes. Now, sometimes you can grab all of this stuff. You can grab a whole bunch of notes and move them over just to snap them to the second part of the grid. You might not be able to grab all of them at once because they won't all fit on the screen, and sometimes notes will bump into each other, and BandLab won't allow you to overlap notes when you do this. But the process is pretty simple. You're going to be watching these numbers up here. Notice how this note falls on measure 4, beat 3. I want it to fall on measure 4 between beat 3 and beat 4. This block right here on the grid. My grid is set to eighth notes. There. Moving along to the next thing. And I'm just going to do this all the way out to measure 9. Here's a section where I played a note a little too early. And now I've made it to the end of measure 8. I'm at the beginning of measure 9. Let's see what this all sounds like. So I'm pretty happy with that. I've got all these upbeats happening in the bass. That's great. Now, when we get to this section, I want the bass to be on every eighth note. I want it to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and really drive ahead. But as you can see, when I entered this with the mouse and I just clicked in one note at a time. There is a way to make this sound like eighth notes without having to go and do this all over again. And what we're going to do is use an effect. So hop into the effects area and grab a delay. So what's going to happen now is that the bass signal is just going to jump in here and it's going to repeat after every quarter note. So let's have a listen. You can kind of hear it. It's a little slow and it's a little quiet. So I'm going to bring up the overall effect level and listen again. It's definitely louder, and I got to bring the time back. I want this to repeat faster so that it lines up as eighth notes. So have a listen. That's sounding a little better. Now I still want the repeats to sound a little stronger. So I'm going to turn up the wet level. The wet versus dry is the difference between the repeated signal and the original signal. So I'm going to turn up the wet level. That's the volume of the repeat, not the volume of the original sound. So now I've got this eighth note happening, which is a lot of fun. So check it out. Here it is without the effect. And here it's with. I like that a lot. Now, here's another thing. I can't have this effect on the entire time because I just fixed my first section of the piece. So what I'm going to do is automate the wet level of this effect. What that means is I'm going to pop into automation and I'm going to put a node here on the wet level. So remember, the wet level is the amount of repeated signal. So at the beginning section, you're not going to hear any of the repeated signal. It's going to sound just like there was no effect on it at all. But when we get to this section, that wet level control is going to go back up and you're going to hear all of those extra repeats. And that's a lot of fun. Okay, go do that.